In boxing, what I've noticed about the foundational or so-called BA community is that we make other fans feel uncomfortable with us having pride within ourselves. Every time we rally behind a fighter that we are supporting, it makes other boxing fans root against that certain fighter even more. The LDBC, these guys, say what you want about these guys, you have to give them credit for not bothering anybody. The LDBC don't bother anybody. They stick to themselves. They have a community where people are welcome. You just got to be very respectful. And they stick to their guns. They're going to support who they want to support, and that's it. And that bothers people from the outside, and that's usually the non-foundation or non-so-called BA fan. They get bothered and triggered by that. They get bothered and triggered by Black unity. And in boxing, that's what I'm pushing for. I'm pushing for Black unity. I mean, every other fan base has that but us. We are the only group of people that are frowned upon for trying to, have some type of unity amongst each other. And we can have that unity. We can have that unity. And our fighters gives us that opportunity to unify. We have great fighters. We've had great fighters throughout the history of the sport of boxing. And one of the things that gets overlooked, and I'm going to continue to make sure that this doesn't get overlooked, is the fact that as a foundational Black American or so-called BA fan, I've never had to wait on one of our fighters to emerge. I was born in 1985. I started watching boxing in 1993. And I've never had to witness not having a fighter being a great representation of the foundational or so-called BA community. We've always had one. There's never been a time where we hadn't had one since I've been alive. Okay? And I know the history. So before I was even born, there's always been a great representation. Always. So each decade, each era, we've always had a fighter being a great representation of us. We've always had fighters dominating at the highest level. And that's not said enough. That's not appreciated enough from the foundational or so-called BA community. Sure, people may not think about that, but that's something that should be acknowledged. Some say, oh, John Boxing, you're always bringing up race. So what? Everybody does that. Everybody does that. And the people that complain about me always bringing up race always make it racial. They just hate the fact that we do it. And that's the truth. We're not allowed to do what other fans have been doing for over hundreds of years. And it rubs people the wrong way when they see the foundational or so-called BA community uniting. And here in this community, the LDBC triggers people because the LDBC is a form of unity, Black unity, and people hate it. They complain about the LDBC all the time, but the LDBC does not bother anyone. But people are always knocking at the doors of the LDBC wanting to know what they're discussing. And this is why you got people taking from them, creating content off of what they took from the LDBC. This is why you got people that complains about Black content always knowing about what's going on here in our spaces. That's because they're always at our doors knocking, trying to get in to hear what we're discussing. We don't go where we're not appreciated. We stay in our own lanes. We stay in our own spaces, and our spaces is cracking. We get it cracking. And that's one thing I can commend about the foundational or so-called BA community. We can be in the worst, the worst situations, but we'll find ways to make that situation or that worst situation become a great, a comfortable situation. That's one thing I can commend about the foundational Black American or the foundational or so-called BA community. And here in this space, we know that we're being attacked from all different angles. There are people that stalk us left and right. And again, we don't bother anybody, but people are always triggered about what we are discussing. And this is why you have these individuals who know so much about the fighters that we support. And every time we have a fighter that we support, you always hear these people tearing down the fighters that we support. That's because they fear Black unity. They fear it. Because the moment that we unify, and I'm talking about the boxing fan base, the moment we become bigger than what we already are. We already control the narrative here in this community. That we do. We already have people, seeking our validation. We already have people wanting to know what we think about certain fighters. We already got fans, anti-Black boxing fans, wanting our approval about certain fighters. If we don't acknowledge a fighter that a non-FBA or so-called non-BA fan support, then we're frowned upon. We're disrespected. We're called casual because we don't pay attention to the fighters that they like. That is them seeking our approval. Okay? So again, we already control the narrative. We already got people taken from us. And the last thing that these people want from us is to unify. And I think it's right that we do that because our fighters for years, over hundreds of years, has been dominating the sport of boxing. And at least we can do as a fan, as a community, is unify and support these fighters. That's what we can do. The Mexican community does it. The European community does it. The Pino community does it. Japanese fans does it. Mexican fans does it. Every fan base globally support their fighters but us. Okay? But us. We are the only group of fans that want to play this fair and unbiased bullshit, while the rest of the world is laughing at us for not doing what they've been doing for over hundreds of years. And that is them becoming unified to support their fighters whenever their fighters fights one of our fighters. These people, they could be bumping heads with each other. They can hate each other. But the moment that their fighter steps in the ring with our fighters, their beef goes out the window. They become unified for 30 minutes. And after that fight, goes down, they can go back to beefing. But for that one event, that 12-round fight, they will become unified. And that's something that we need to do. Because our fighters deserve it. Like I said, I was born in 1985. Okay? Started watching boxing in 1993. Ever since I've been watching the sport, I've always witnessed a foundational or so-called BA fighter being a great representation of us. They represent us very well. And they're continuing to represent us very well. I mean, when you look at the crop that's coming up, all these fighters, these foundational or so-called BA fighters, has the potential to be the number one pound for pound fighter. I mean, I've been saying this for many, many years. When it comes to a talent flow, there's nothing better than the foundational or so-called BA's talent flow. We have the best talent flow globally. Globally. Every single year we produce. Yes, there's a shortage of foundational Black American fighters, and that's due to them not having to get beat upside their heads for a living anymore. I mean, back in the 70s and early 80s, boxing was an escape route for poor people. That's what it was. In order for someone that's living in poverty to make it, is for them to turn to boxing. Now you got, the foundational Black American or so-called BA community are now able to work good jobs to support their families, and they ain't got to get beat upside their heads to make a dollar. Some are joining the NBA, some are joining football, some are doing other professions to make a living, and instead of having to get beat upside their heads to make a living. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with fighters getting beat upside their heads to make a living. It's just that the foundational Black American athlete don't really have to do that anymore. So I can see there's a bit of a shortage for the foundational or so-called BA fighter. But even with that, even with the shortage, the foundational or so-called BA fighter remains the best fighter in boxing. And Terrence Crawford proved that a couple of months ago.